Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Excited about today's Tuesday session. Tuesdays are new. Awesome. Excited about Tuesdays. Always thank you to our Vice President, Miss Lotta Love Hawkins, of our Community Engagement Committee, as well as our leadership. Excited about our special guests, as well as leader, and that is Miss Carissa. And I will turn it over to Lotta, and we will get rolling, everyone. Happy to have you here. Welcome.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you. I am doing probably what we shouldn't be doing by being on this call and driving, but we're all super busy, so I am not looking at my phone. I'm talking to my car, and so, but today it is our privilege and honor to talk to one of our fan faves, to be honest, Miss Carissa Carter. We are dubbing her the Intermodal Queen. I'm pretty sure you wore that crown for quite a few years now, so it's not our original take on it, but we do enjoy your time that you spend with us here as an autumn leader, an autumn member, an advocate in the community, and a long-standing person in the logistics community. Since we have a rather small room, just so to give some reference of who all is joining us today, I will call some names as I quickly look. I Sissy, I'm just so a person of habit, looking and talking at the same time. But if we could just do a real quick location and who you are and what do you do in the industry, and then we'll get back to our presenter at hand. So we're going to start at the top here with Candyland Express.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Candace of Candy Lane Express Dispatching, and I'm in Douglasville, Georgia. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Next person is Johnny Taylor.
Hey there, I'm Jonique Taylor. I am a mentor and coach. I'm also the ADA's Roadwise mentor and as well as the chairperson for the ADA Marketplace. And I am a seasoned vet in the industry with about 28 years of experience in the industry. And I am based out of Atlanta, Georgia.
Thank you, Ms. Jonique. Look, you have all the hats. So thank you for all you do. Ms. Natasha Jones.
Good evening. My name is Natasha Jones. I am the CEO of HD Screening and Laboratory. We do medical compliance, drug screens, occupational health services, physicals. I am also the VP of Mental Health and Wellness at AUTA. And happy to be here tonight. I'm located in the Metro Atlanta area.
Thank you very much, Ms. Natasha. I don't want to butcher your last name, Sarah. I didn't ask earlier how to pronounce it, but Sarah, if you'd like to do an intro.
Yeah. So it's Sarah E. Berry. You just can't look at it. Because it's gonna throw you off every time. But I'm the CEO of Just Brief Logistics, based out of Little Rock, Arkansas, and we do DOT regulatory compliance, government contracting, and business management services. And I also started the Quiet Grind, which is a entrepreneur safe space about the unspoken truths of entrepreneurship. Talk about the hardships and things like that. You know, we always glorify the success on social media, but nobody talks about the failures. So it's a safe space and community with that, and I'm the co-founder of that.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. And without further ado, I can't read the slide, but I kind of know a lot about Miss Carissa Carter here. She is definitely an instrumental woman in the industry, the founder of the Charleston Truck Expo, and she hails out of Charleston, South Carolina, and she's here to share some top questions that we've been getting from the community in regards to what all is going on. I shared a post about some of the tariffs, and just that was a question that we keep getting, and so she was gracious enough to say that she'll talk about that here today, but also just what is intermodal, where do you get your loads, what is the TWIC card, and what is that process, and just sharing her expertise and services with our community. So I hand it on over to you, Carissa. Thank you.
Thank you, Lotta. Good evening, everyone. I do want to say that a lot of this, some of you all may have seen before, and some of you that are new to my introduction, I will want to start by saying I am Carissa Carter. I am deemed the Intermodal Queen, thanks to Lotta, Little Miss Trucking. And I kind of gained that name from 24 years. Actually, it's now 26 years of experience in transportation and logistics. I actually got into intermodal by accident. I tell people sometimes that I didn't choose trucking, trucking chose me. I don't know how many of you all else, how many others feel that way. But I started off as a customer service rep for OOCL, which is one of the steamship line out of Charleston. Once I moved here back in 1999, in 2000, I started working for different trucking companies. I had no idea what intermodal was. I had no idea what a container was. And I really had no idea that the container actually sat on a chassis. How about that? So that the wheels weren't connected. So through my 26 years of experience, I have definitely gained a lot of information, a lot of knowledge, met a lot of customers, done a lot of business with people who have been in this industry pretty much for their whole life. Since I'm based in Charleston, South Carolina, it's a big port city. And, you know, the port is one of their major industry, major industries here. And with that being said, you have the ILA workers, so they're dock workers, and then of course you have the trucking companies. So once I got into trucking, man, I had no idea that there were so many people out there that looked like us that really didn't have the basic information on even how to create their business. So when the opportunity presented itself, and God blessed me to be an entrepreneur back in 2011, I vowed that I would make sure that everyone who worked for me was treated fairly. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't taking anything from any, I didn't want to take anything from the drivers because I worked for 6 different trucking companies as terminal managers, and I didn't always agree with my bosses, and what they were saying and how they were handling the drivers. So I vowed to myself that I was going to educate them. I was going to try to inspire them to be the best career truck driver with the CDL, not just the steering wheel holder, because I believe there is a difference. Um, but that became my passion. My passion became my drivers, as well as my customers and my staff. So, with that being said, I founded the Charleston Trucking Expo during the COVID pandemic. A lot of people reached out to me that were non-essential workers and were like, how do we get into trucking? And they wanted to know, what classes to take, or they kind of thought it was like, hey, I can work from home. Just tell me what to do. And most all of us on that call know that it's not that simple, right? So I was riding across one of the bridges looking at beautiful Charleston, South Carolina. And I was like, God, I know I have a purpose. I know I have I know you put this calling on me for something. Just lead me in the right direction. And so that is where the Charleston Truck Expo was birthed from. Not only did I want to educate and inspire, I wanted people to know what we do. Because there's a lot more to trucking than, the guys just driving. And to be honest, when you talk transportation and logistics, a lot of times the drivers are on the low end of the totem pole. So I got a great committee together. And I said, so I want it to be something that not only can we educate the community about what we do and educate the drivers on how their businesses are formed, but I wanted to shine the light on other entrepreneurships other entrepreneurs, because I know in entrepreneurship, there's a lot of stuff that I didn't know when I started. We could talk about 941 taxes. Let's just talk about benefits, because when you're not working a regular 9 to 5 for a big company, you're responsible for your own health insurance, your own life insurance, um, tax preparation, all of that stuff I wanted to learn as well. So that is where the Charleston Truck Expo came from. And since my niche was intermodal and we were in Charleston, South Carolina, that was pretty much the focus on our owner operators here. I had no idea that a lot of people didn't even know what intermodal was. So let's start there. For those of you all who don't really know the definition of intermodal, don't be surprised, because probably 75% of the country doesn't know the definition of intermodal. But intermodal is actually the method of moving goods through multiple modes of transportation. So that's what makes us intermodal. Like a domestic carrier that pulls a 53-foot van or a flatbed, that's their means of transportation, a truck with that trailer behind it. Well, if it's an intermodal shipment, it actually originated either here in the States or in another country, and it was loaded into an ocean container. It was trucked to the port. It was exported out of the port by a vessel. So now we've got the truck and we have a vessel. And once it arrived to its destination country, whether it's the US or not, then it could be put on a train so that it could go to the warehouse. Of course, some of us know about air freight. It could be put on a plane and go to a warehouse. And then hopefully, to me, it's put on, we get to truck it to the warehouse, because that's actually how I get paid. I'm an intermodal trucking agent. So my drivers actually pick up the containers out of the port and deliver them to their destination. So that's actually what the definition of intermodal is because we are moving goods through multiple modes of transportation: trucks, ships, trains, planes, and hopefully again back to the truck. Now you have intermodal and domestic intermodal. So the ocean line containers are owned by the steamship lines. Domestic containers are also owned by the companies such as CSX, like the railways. JB Hunt now has domestic intermodal containers. I believe Walmart even has domestic intermodal containers. All that means is that intermodal container that's domestic originated here and it stays here. It doesn't get put on the ship. So some of you all might not realize that when you see that JB Hunt container that's not a 53-foot dry van, but it actually has alpha and numeric letters on the side, that's considered a domestic intermodal shipment. It's not attached to its own wheels. It still has to be mounted on a chassis. And it's moving from the warehouse, from the rail, from wherever via truck. Now, our intermodal, and I say our because I am a keeper of the intermodal. I feel like it's also my baby. Our intermodal containers are owned by individual steamship lines. And when I say a steamship line, those are the big ocean vessels that you see coming into the port. And as Lotta mentioned, our hot topic as tariffs today, that those vessels are moving between numerous countries. Of course, some of the largest ports in the world are Shanghai. You have Le Havre, France. You have then are the U.S. ports like Charleston, South Carolina, Savannah, Georgia, Norfolk, Virginia. But they're coming from Beijing, they're coming from Shanghai, they're coming from Le Havre, they're coming from other countries that are exporting the goods from their country and importing the goods into our country. And the steamship line owns those containers. They route those shipments to the local ports here in the US. And that's what it makes us intermodal versus domestic intermodal as well. Now, the international shipments, that's the big topic for this evening. And that is also one of my soft spots, because I don't know the impact that, if people understand the impact that could be possibly coming, because of that intermodal versus domestic. I always call it like the circle of life, when I'm doing classes or when I'm speaking or even when I'm training in my office. So if that shipment starts off we're going to say Le Havre, even though I used to use China for my topics and my discussion. So if the shipment starts off in France, then that steamship line, that ocean liner, they own those containers. Someone makes a booking with that container and says, I'd like to ship 5 40-foot containers to Charleston, South Carolina for my customer. So somebody in the US ordered that product from a French manufacturer. The container goes out of the port of France, it goes to the warehouse, it gets loaded, it returns back to that port in Le Havre, it gets put on a vessel, that vessel sets sail. Now that vessel is going to stop on its route throughout the world. I mean, that's what makes them international shipments. It may stop in Germany, it may stop in Africa, it may stop in India, and once it hits the US, it's going to go to the New York port, it's going to go to the New Jersey port, it's going to go to Norfolk port, it's going to make its way down the coast to the Charleston port, and the ports of Charleston, the ports of Savannah, depending on its final destination. And when I say final destination, that is who ordered that product, right? Depending on where it's going, then the customer either paid to put it on the rail if it came into Charleston and it's delivering to Indiana. Well, it would be cheaper for that customer to put it on the rail and rail it to Indiana. Now, if it's just delivering to Charlotte, North Carolina, or maybe Spartanburg, South Carolina, then that shipment is trucked from the port here in Charleston to Charleston, or excuse me, to Charlotte or Spartanburg. Now, in order for the drivers to get in and off that port, it does require a TWIC card. The TWIC process actually happened, of course, during my 26-year tenure. So the good Federal Motor Carrier Association and our federal government said, hey, we need to issue an identification card to make sure that we don't have terrorists and criminals coming on our port, picking up stuff that they're going to use with ill intent and purposes. So the application for the TWIC card is through the transportation, the TSA, the Transportation Security Association. So you do go on the website and actually apply for a TWIC card. That TWIC card, they're going to run your background check. They're going to see if you have what your criminal history is. They're going to verify that information. You pay a fee and you get your TWIC card and you can access the federal ports. And I do want to stress federal ports because intermodal shipments are controlled by the federal government. The ports are operated by like the South Carolina State Port Authority. So they're operated by local organizations, but everything intermodal is cleared through the federal government because we are importing and exporting goods and it has to be regulated. They actually have to be examined. They have to be customs cleared so that the government knows what's coming in and out of our country. You all, some of you all may have seen some of those crazy videos, like containers that arrive with people in them. That's real. Because they're filling out that paperwork saying, hey, I have 5 cars in it, but that's not what they're putting in there. So the TWIC card and the federal government, the TWIC card helps the federal government regulate who's going on and off of the port. So for those that want to be intermodal carriers or dispatchers that want to get into intermodal, a TWIC card is definitely a necessity. It's not an end all be all. I have some guys who have worked for me that were like, Miss Carissa, back when I was younger, I wasn't able, I made some bad decisions, so I'm not able to get a TWIC card. So then they don't have access to the port. However, we can use local draymen to pull those containers to and from the port to the yard. So I just wanted to add that note that just because a driver cannot get a TWIC card does not mean that they cannot pull intermodal. It just means that they cannot access the port. The one thing that is required for all trucking companies to get on and off the port is an interchange with all of the steamship lines. So the federal government, once again, to keep everything uniform, they said we need one association or one organization for the trucking companies to go through so that we can vet them pretty much. And that's called the UIIA. And the UIIA stands for the Uniform Intermodal Interchange and Facilities Access Agreement. So in order for you to have access to the port, the steamship lines, containers on the port, you have to become an approved carrier through the UIIA. And once again, it's just one central organization that handles the agreements for the various steamship lines. And what are the steamship lines again? Just a reminder, those are the companies that own the ocean containers. Those are the companies that own the vessels that import and export those containers internationally. Okay? So once you apply with the UIIA, they have standard insurance requirements. Why do they have standard insurance requirements? Because if you are importing or exporting high value or high dollar cargo, then you have to be able to be covered for that. So if a customer says, "Hey Carissa, we need you to transport this pharmaceutical load from Charleston to Greenwood, South Carolina." Now, if I didn't have the proper insurance and something were to go wrong in that with that load, whether it's an accident or a refrigerated container that wasn't up to the correct temperature, I'm responsible for that cargo claim, just like any domestic carrier would be as well, right? So the UIIA screens to make sure that all of the carriers have the required insurances. Once you meet the application process with the UIIA, and they vet your insurance, they are going to send that information over to the various steamship lines. Off the top of my head, I can think of six or seven different steamship lines that come into the port of Charleston. So the UIIA is sending that carrier's information to those steamship lines. Now the steamship line is going to approve that carrier based on UIIA's recommendation. UIIA is going to issue you a SCAT code. That SCAT code is how your company is differentiated between the different carriers. So they know who picked up that container. If the container is involved in an accident, the driver hits and runs, they're going to go back to the port. They're going to go back to the steamship line and say, "Hey, who outgated this container from the port of Charleston? It was involved in an accident and the driver's not here." Not like that ever happens, right, y'all? But that is also like the check and double check process. They want to know who's moving that cargo. So they issue you a SCAT code so that you can access their equipment. Now, once you get that SCAT code, depending on the area that you're at, of course, I'm going to continue to reference Charleston because that's also my baby and that's my home. The Charleston and most other ports have their own system. So, in order for us to be able to move this freight, we have to know that the cargo has been approved by the feds, that it's been cleared by customs to be released. So, once the steamship lines put the release into the system, then we can go into the Charleston port system and we can check the status of those releases. We can check the status of its arrival to the port and we can schedule our deliveries to the customer. So once that container started in Le Havre, France, and the customer sent me a delivery notification saying, "Hey, Carissa, I have 5 containers that are coming into the port of Charleston, and I need them to deliver to Greenwood, South Carolina." I'm able to track that container. Once again, y'all know when the feds are involved, there's going to be a paper trail, right? So when the person in the company in the US ordered that shipment from Le Havre, France, Le Havre, France has to file the paperwork with their government. That customer here has to file the paperwork with our government to tell them what's inside, to make sure that we don't have any stowaways and that it's just auto parts. Once that information is cleared, and once that information is verified and put in the system, we can follow it. You can access that information. Once again, since we're intermodal, we're going to be looking at 3 or 4 different ways to access it. You're going to start with the ocean line container. So if it's a container that's shipped on Mediterranean shipping, you can go to msc.org and you can track your shipment. It'll tell you when the vessel left Le Havre, France. It'll tell you the next port that it's destined for and the arrival date at that port. So we actually can put that container number in from the time that it loads the originating the originating port until it reaches its final destination. Some of our shipments still come into the rail. So maybe my customer ordered a shipment that went into Los Angeles for whatever reason. It's probably because of the cost. So if it discharged at the port of Los Angeles, then it's going to be put on the rail. I can also access the rail system so that I can follow that cargo until it reaches me. So now I looked at Mediterranean shipping. I saw that it loaded the vessel in Le Havre, France. I found the destination to be Charleston and the estimated arrival to that destination. But it tells me that this is going to be shipped via CSX. So now I can access CSX's website and follow the shipment on the rail. CSX will keep you updated on when it's estimated to arrive to Charleston. they'll issue a pickup number to the customer. The customer gives us the pickup number so that we can go to the rail, pick up that container from the rail, and deliver it. 9 times out of 10, once that container is empty, it's going to return to the port because, once again, the steamship lines own that container. It's not like the owner operators that own their own 53-foot dry van or their own 53-foot flatbed, or excuse me, 40-foot flatbed. That's why they have the UIIA associations, to make sure that we're following the rules of the steamship line. Okay, so now we've gotten our delivery order. We're following it through the various modes of transportation. The steamship lines, we access their website. We can access the port's website, and we can access the rail's website. And your question is, well, Carissa, who sent you that delivery order? That is one of the hardest parts to get into.
I think she dropped out.
Did we lose Carissa?
I think so. She'll be back.
Getting good too.
Sorry. I know, right?
Right?
I think
It's like that. Everybody was like at the tip of their seat, like, oh yeah, oh yeah. That was really good.
It is good. She knows her stuff. Let me send her a
Yep.
message just so she's probably still talking. You know, when you're sort of like going and you don't even realize there's been an interruption. Oh, there she
Well,
goes.
okay, she's come back in. Okay.
Yep, there she goes.
And this would be what happened
Carissa?
in the intermodal trucking industry, you all. I'm sorry. When the driver calls in the middle of my Zoom transportation because he can't pick up his load, and I hit instead of hitting ignore, I hit accept. I apologize. And let me get back to my screen share. But are y'all doing okay? Are y'all firing me?
Yeah.
Oh no, you were doing so good. Everybody was like, "Woo, dun dun dun!" You just like went off, and we were like,
I'm sorry.
"So that was good. You're doing amazing."
And I was really trying. I have to. Lotta and Nicole know me well, so they know that I'm still old school. So I'm learning. I sat down at this computer. I was like, I'm gonna make sure that my screen is sharing. I'm gonna make sure my video is on. I'm gonna make sure my audio is on. So I do apologize for that, you all. And so I'm gonna bring that screen back up. But I know that I get in my little groove. So we're talking about how did I get that customer? Where do I get that freight from? That is the hardest part, to be honest, is locating those customers, guys, because there is no that board. There is no internet truck stop that is specifically 100% intermodal. Um, And now my screen doesn't want to share, of course, because that is just my luck for today. If it doesn't load this time, y'all are just going to see my pretty face. And I'm sure that Lotta will help me get the PowerPoint out to you, okay? Y'all can still hear me, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes.
very good.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, it looks like y'all get to look at me now. So how do I get those customers? I started off at OOCL. I went from OOCL to a trucking company. The gentleman said, yo, Carissa, you got the it factor. And one thing that I say, and for most of you all on this call, we know that it's not on us, it's in us, right? And he recognized that in me. And he said, you've got the it factor, Carissa. If you ever want to get into trucking, like, yo, you know how to talk to people, you're passionate, your follow-up skills, you got great customer service skills. So the money was good in trucking. So Carissa left OOCL and said, yes, sir, I'll be your terminal manager. Relationships. That's where my customers came from. To be honest, when I started with him at the first trucking company, the relationships that grew with the drivers, as well as the relationships that grew with the customers, that is what opened my doors opportunities to those customers. As I was saying, there's no DAT board, there's no internet truck stop board that's specifically for intermodal. Why do you all think that is? Because of what I said earlier. Y'all don't forget. Because they don't want everybody accessing this stuff, right? Because the more hands in the pot that are not vetted, the more problems the US government is going to have. So in order for you to access intermodal shipments, you have to be vetted. TWIC card, UIIA. Okay? Now, we have seen more domestic brokers get involved in intermodal shipments. We hate it. Just so you know, I love y'all brokers. If you have any brokers on the phone, I love you personally, but I don't like it when they get involved in intermodal shipments because they look at it as a regular domestic shipment, and it's not. Because of COVID, of course, we had the influx of freight. I made more money during COVID than I have in 26 years, guys. Most of these owner operators that you see that open their own companies after 2022, that's why, because there were so many customers that were looking for these loads to deliver and not enough companies to deliver them. They said, hey, I'm going to open my own company, right? And they still got vetted. They got they got approved. So the carrier did what they were supposed to do, but the customs house broker started getting phone calls that said, well, hey, we can do this cheaper, which I still don't understand. How can you put a middleman, i.e. another from customs house broker to freight broker, how can you put a middleman in between me and the person paying the bill and they do it cheaper for me? So I still haven't answered that question yet, but a lot of companies took that route. They would rather send all of their shipments that were coming into the US to one company, whether it was coming into New York, Norfolk, or Charleston. They could send it to Nolan Transportation or Steam Logistics, and Steam Logistics went out to their carrier network. Okay. So if you do see intermodal shipments posted, that's usually what has happened. And I just wanted to add that because that's going to lead us into why that happened. Once again, COVID, the influx of freight, but there was a shortage of drivers. There were not enough trucks on the road to pull the amount of cargo that the US was ordering. And now that we have this tariff word, I think it's going to happen again. Because what is the tariff? The tariff is that tax that the government imposed, and I'm sure most of you all have been following this. And I'm betting my audience, so I'm gonna say that you know what a tariff is. So the Trump administration said, "Yo, we need to have more domestic manufacturing, and China is just taking advantage of us because 42%, and this is a number that I know, 42% of our imports come from China, y'all. Okay, and we owe China for the United States. Half of our $1 trillion deficit is to them. Half of those cranes that you see in the ports, China sent them for free. Well, they sent them on a signature. But that's the part that y'all don't know, right? That's the part that we don't hear on CNN. Why are we imposing the tariffs on a country like China? Well, the government wants us to believe it's because it's our enemy. But personally, factually, it's because we owe them so much money. And, Trump is good at that, not paying his bills. Okay, I'm not doing that. But if you do, you owe this country trillions of dollars in trillions of dollars because you signed for imports based on based on the company. So now he says we need to start manufacturing it ourselves. So what does that mean for us? Tariffs mean that the cost of those goods are going to increase because even though we're saying in the US, if you want us to buy your stuff and you're going to ship it to us, you're going to have to pay a tariff in order to send that to us. Now, in transportation and logistics, if a customer says that this shipment is overweight or this shipment is in a refrigerated container or refrigerated van, or if this customer says this shipment has 5 stops, do you eat the cost of that? I don't. Because if that container is overweight or if that container has 5 stops, then what am I doing? I'm charging the customer for that. So when the US government says, hey, you have to pay a tariff in order to import cargo into our country, do you think China is paying the tariff? No. China's saying, well, we're going to put that cost back on the consumer. So that's what has the Dow in an uproar. That's what has these people marching on their cities complaining about Trump, and I'm sure it has to do with immigration and everything else. But the problem that they have is like, you're saying that it's for the betterment of the United States. However, if we want local manufacturing, then Carissa would be on here talking about how much we export out of the United States. One of the things I like to tell people, I don't know if I have anything around me now, is just if you're in the car at a stoplight, or if you order something for your kids, pick it up and see where it's made at. How many times does it say made in the USA? It's made in Taiwan, it's made in Korea, it's made in China, it's made in Germany, which actually is the definition of supply chain. The international trade is the beginning of a supply chain. In order for Ford to manufacture US cars, they're ordering parts from somewhere. Here in Charleston, we have a Mercedes factory. Mercedes is a German vehicle, I think, right? Mercedes is a German vehicle. It's manufactured here because they don't want to pay to ship them, each one that they manufacture, okay? So if they manufactured all of them in Germany, that means they got to ship them to the US to sell. But we like our Mercedes. We like our BMWs. We're the country that's spending the money on those cars. So they say, let's go to Charleston and open a manufacturing facility there. We're going to ship the parts of this German-made car to Charleston, South Carolina, because it's a part of our supply chain. And it's cheaper to ship the parts than to ship the car, right? So guess what's going to happen to the price of those Mercedes and those BMWs? Guess what's going to happen to the price of anything that you pick up that says made somewhere other than the US? That price is going to increase. How is that going to affect us? People are going to have less money to spend, or they're going to stop buying. Like, I heard people started eating egg whites when they couldn't buy eggs. So who's going to buy the Mercedes if we don't have the money because of the price that increased because of the tariffs? Why did the price increase because of the tariffs, y'all? Because the products that are used to manufacture are purchased through the supply chain from other countries. So those countries are not going to pay the tariff. They're going to put it back on the consumer. So now we're not buying nothing, okay? We don't have no, I'm not paying $125,000 for a used Mercedes. So if you're not spending money, then what happens to our economy? Then we go into a recession. But we're talking about transportation and logistics. So if you're not spending money and we go into a recession, there's nothing, nobody's ordering nothing. There's nothing for us to truck. So if I can't get the box to Spartanburg out of the Port of Charleston because nobody's ordering the product, then you can't move it from Spartanburg to Illinois to the manufacturing plant. So that international trade is going to affect the domestic trade. China is threatening the steamship lines. They're saying, hey, if y'all pull into the US, we're not paying those tariffs, and this is how much we're going to charge you. So now the steamship lines are telling people, my ship is not as full. So if their ship is not as full, what are they doing for the ones that aren't on that ship? They're going on that rate. They're going up on that rate also, right? So now it may cost $12,000 to ship a container from Le Havre, France to the Port of Charleston. If these tariffs continue and at the rate that we're going, that $12,000 shipping cost is going to become $24,000. So now they don't want to pay that $24,000, or they're going to put that price back on the consumer, and who can afford that? So if nothing is shipped, I don't have anything to pick up from the port. I can't get it to Spartanburg so that you domestic carriers can move it from Spartanburg to Illinois. So what's going on with our drivers? What's going on with our industry? What's going on with us and our families? We're losing income. It's a part of that recession, right? And I've been trying to get on CNN so that I can tell them this. One thing that they don't talk about is, why is there a driver shortage? There's always a driver shortage because the international trade industry affects the trucking industry. Wars affect the trucking industry. When the trucking industry's freight is slowed down and those truck drivers can't bring home that amount of money, they gotta go get a regular job, y'all. They saying, so now they're parking that truck. That truck is getting repossessed. And then when the tariffs go away and they're sitting in Washington saying, yes, you know, or another global pandemic, and everybody, all of these manufacturers and these companies want to order these supplies, those guys have parked their truck. I know Lotta could attest to that, just about the cost of the insurance premiums that they're faced. When those products prices go up, the prices on their repairs go up. The mechanic can't replace a turbo this year for what he could replace it for 5 years ago. And after the tariffs, he's not going to be able to replace it next year for what he could have replaced it for this year. So the owner operator has to be able to make sense out of his business. He's got to be able to market his truck. And if there's no freight coming in, then he's not getting a very big check. And so right now, that check that I was talking about during COVID was the most money that we made. We are back down to prices, to quoting rates as low as before COVID. I don't know if there's anybody on here that's doing dispatching, but it's usually a slow progression, but you start to see the rates drop. Why? Because supply and demand. We could set our own rate when we were in demand because there was a truck driver shortage and there was more freight than there were drivers. But now when there's less freight and more drivers, then that power shifts to that broker. And they could demand, well, they could say, hey, I've got Michelle with JSJG that's quoting me a cheaper price than this. So now I have to drop my rate. When I drop my rate to the customer, that means I drop the driver's pay. When that driver's pay's dropped, now he's trying to figure out how to operate his business. So how does tariffs affect us? It affects us greatly. And you all hear they use the term supply chain. But I want them to talk trucking specifically. I want somebody to notice that this is affecting the drivers. And once it affects the drivers, it affects their families. Once it affects the drivers, it affects all of us in transportation and logistics who are moving freight. So now you've got 10 companies that are bidding on one load versus 10 companies that are bidding on 100 loads, if that makes sense. And I'm sure that it does. So tariffs are something that I think that people look at it from the economical point of view, and it is an econ class, in the beginning, period. And these are the people who are running our country. But I'm not offended. I'm not. If somebody's ordering something for me and it's costing, and UPS went up on my shipping, I'm putting that cost back on the person who ordered it. And eventually, if that cost is at, what are we at now? 126% or something. So if you're increasing that tariff by 126%, some people are going to be like, it's not worth it to buy that knockoff Gucci for $900 when the original Gucci was $1,200. I'm just using that for an example. But you see what I'm saying? I don't think that the conversations are had enough about how it affects us in transportation logistics. They, like I said, they keep using supply chain because we are all a part of a circle. Imports started in another country. It's the same way that we deliver it here. It affects their domestic trade because we do export some, some commodities, and they're taxing the commodities that we export, our agricultural commodities. Like that, they are the poor farmers, and they probably voted for this administration, but you've got people now that are in Canada saying, well, let me reach out to maybe Argentina and see how much it would be for soybeans, because I don't think I want to pay that tariff. So that means they're going to start looking for other countries to direct those costs to, and I think that it's going to affect us in a whole. I would like to end on a positive note. Somebody has to wake up and say, that this is affecting our country. This is affecting our recession. This is affecting our employment rates, our job market. And not to mention, we're going to need that toilet paper and them paper towels, So I don't think it can last always. I think that it is an argument, I think it's between leaders right now. I hope to see it change, but the global effects of tariffs, it could be astronomical. We could go into a recession. I don't want to speak in the Great Depression, the power, life and death is in the what lives in the power of the tongue. So we're going to speak these tariffs out. We're going to speak our industry up because we do keep the world moving. We don't just keep the US moving because once again, it's a circle, y'all. Once it gets from France to us, then we can send it to Spartanburg. Then you can pick it up from Spartanburg, the domestic carriers, and take it to Illinois. So we have to keep the world moving. It's going to come back, but we are going to feel the effects. Our revenue is going to be cut. We're going to have to tighten our belt a little bit. But stay positive, stay encouraged. Know that you're not alone. You're not doing anything wrong because it's the effects of the world that are rolling down on us. So now somebody asked me questions since I talked so long and got disconnected. And I do apologize for that.
Wow, this is amazing. You did an awesome job. Look, we got to call CNN for you because this is definitely it felt like a TED Talk. I mean, you kept us on pins and needles. Well, myself, I just speak for myself. I followed you pretty well, and I'm not in drayage and intermodal directly, and so it was just like, wow, okay, so you just made it make sense. So I appreciate you for that. I'm going to yield it to the audience here, but I do have two questions if there are none from the floor. So if you'd like to ask a question to Miss Carissa here with all her knowledge and just to get it straight from, if you would, the horse's mouth as far as what operations looks like, not the hypothetical, but what it's looking like. She just broke it all the way down for us.
Facts.
Any questions? Yeah, you're welcome. No, thank you. I was just like, oh, okay. Well, here's my question real quick. So also talk about how intermodal is planned very much in advance, especially in comparison to spot market. Can you talk a little bit about just that difference in how you get your customers and how you're working with your customers?
That's a good question because I did kind of get into the tariffs when I was noticing the time. When I said that about there's no load board, like there's no DAT board, there's no internet truck stop because everything has to be regulated. That's also the transit time because intermodal is planned so far in advance because once Mercedes orders these parts, then they have to file this paperwork with customs. They're reaching out for the purchase order for their manufacturer overseas. Then they're booking it with the ocean container line, right? And they're saying, I need to bring 4 40-foot loads into the Port of Charleston to deliver to Greenwood, South Carolina. So they have a process. A lot of these processes start months before they arrive. Because now they've had to place the order, they've got to make the booking, they have to get it customs cleared. So that is why our customer base is so small. And that's why it's harder to get into intermodal. One, because you have to be vetted, and two, because the customer base is small, because these are customs house brokers who are dealing directly with the shippers and the manufacturers in order to place those orders with the steamship lines. And to be honest, because of the cost, it's not cheap to send something from Le Havre, France or China to Vax. And by the time it gets from 2 weeks, Michelle, I think the transit time on the water from Shanghai, if I'm correct, I think I was gonna say that we usually get arrival notification when it's like 2 weeks out, but that probably loaded 2 months ago. So the spot market, somebody places that order and it's already sitting in a warehouse here domestically and the truck can go jump on it. But when it comes to intermodal, it has to be booked, it has to be shipped, and then it's going to stop all around the world, all around that globe. And it's going, and in the US, it's stopping at 4 ports before it gets to us. So it may take that customer 2 months, 3 months to get their order into into their local port. And that's also what makes our customer base smaller, because they are customs house brokers. That's another industry that we're not in, y'all. And we can, and I'm looking into it, but we can be customs house brokers as well, because if it's got to get in this country, it has to be cleared by customs. And so that's the answer, Lotta. The transit time from where it's manufactured and where it's shipped until it until it arrives to its destination here. And there's only certain companies that can clear that cargo to get in the United States. So our circle is smaller. So that's another reason I say I don't like it when they delegated that stuff out to the domestic brokers, because they don't know the game. Yes, ma'am.
That makes more sense, because that's a lot of components. Because I'm just like, you already got to deal with the buyer and the shipment and the shipment of the of friends. You were talking about the hard pen. I'm just like, that's too many. There's too many hands like in there. Like, it's already enough dealing with that. Yeah, that's kind of crazy. I bet you do I have like a vessel in the ground transportation hazmat book, because I have my hazmat instructor certification too. I said, I bet she reads a lot. Like, like that book is already thick alone. Yes. So it's like a dictionary.
That hazmat is a whole, yeah, girl. That's definitely a whole other thing, because we talk about these vessels, and I'm just gonna plug that in there. So like you got that hazmat book, but on that vessel, certain hazmat classes can't be stowed beside each other. The
yes, I'm surprised you didn't talk about that. I'm just like, there's so much into it. I'm just like, she want a brief overview of it. Like, it's so much in depth when it comes to that different type of stuff. Like, it's a lot.
And I also think, and one of the questions a lot of ask is why it's, or, like her and I spoke about before, is why is it so hard for carriers to get into it? Because there are so many components. So a lot of carriers jump in, they purchase that insurance they need to get on the UIIA, they get that SCAT code. But the first time they pull that box off of the port and that box doesn't go back in because the customer talked to them, oh, I need you to drop this box for a week. And then can you come back and get it in a week? And the trucking company says, sure, no problem. You getting charged for that chassis. You're getting charged for that box. So that box that you just made a commission of $125 off of, it just cost you $4,000, because you do not own that equipment. So lack of knowledge would be another reason that even if people do get into intermodal, that they don't stay, because a lot of them lose the revenue because there are so many components. And we're going to break down import on the class. We're going to break down export on the class. We're going to talk about customs clearance. We're going to talk about all that, because as y'all can tell, I like to talk, and I done ran out of time.
Look, and so last but not least, and that was awesome. And look, we're looking forward to that, because that is, as you said, an area that we're not looking at because we don't really hear about it as much. And it's a very secure area, because even in the midst of everything going on, stuff is still going on, and it's planned in advance. Please share with us your resource, you as a resource, and then any other recommendations on for someone in between now and reaching out to you can look into to get more to be more educated.
Absolutely. You all can follow me. My personal Facebook page is Corey Mills Carter. I have my CM Transportation Facebook page, as well as Instagram and Charleston Truck Expo. www.cmtransportationllc.net is my website. Charleston Truck Expo is a website. But if you want to go in and look it up, start with the UIIA. Look up, like, terminology is really big, so that you know who the ocean line container companies are, where your port cities are. Is there one close to you? There are a lot of trucking companies. There are a lot of owner operators that work out of the ports. Yes, UIIA.org. That's going to give you information on how to get set up and get started. Look up customs house brokers. in your area. And by all means, please reach out to me if you have any questions. I am working on trying to put together a class, but the hardest part about the intermodal class is there's so many moving pieces, and I like to make sure that if I'm giving it to you, that you can get the 100%. I don't want you out there stuck and be like, oh, I didn't know that. And that's what happens to a lot of carriers. So please follow me on social media, Instagram, ask me questions. The audit events, I'm there. If I'm on the call, reach out to me. You can email me at ccarter@Cowan, COWAN, agents, AGENTS, .com. That's my personal email address. And you can access my phone number through LADA. It's 843-614-9925 on those Saturday morning calls. And when we're on there, I would be more than happy to answer any questions. And also that TWIC card, transportation, the TSA, Transportation Security Administration, can get you information on the requirements of the TWIC card to get on and off of the ports. Miss Nicole, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you close out. But see, now when y'all hang up, y'all make sure and go tell somebody about the info session. Like, Ada, we are here to share information. We have so much knowledge between all of us in different aspects of this industry that people don't even know about. So once you tap into an association like Ada, you can go from insurance to brokerage to the TMS systems, and to intermodal. And we not power, right?
That's right. That's right. Thank you, Miss Carissa, for using your power to drive change. You are a rock star, especially in your space. By all means, if you didn't, make sure you tap into her. She's incredible. If you haven't heard her speak before and this is your first time, I'm sure you learned something. If you didn't, you weren't listening, honey. Because when I tell you she was spitting knowledge, thank you so much for making sure that our community is knowledgeable. All right, guys, it is 8:04. Went over a little bit because, hey, we was learning, honey. And that's what this is all about. I am so happy to have you here. Thank you for being the better part of ADA. One team, one dream is what we like to say in the background for our leaders. And that's what we mean. So we thank you again, Lotta, Natasha, Jeff, Carissa, Jonique, all of us that are literally, when I say dedicated to ensure your growth and development, take advantage, guys. Make sure you tap in with each and every one of us. We're here to help you. Thank you, everyone, and have an amazing night. Lotta, if you want to say a few words, other than that, I'm done. Have a great one, everyone.
No, ma'am, that was great. Thank you, everyone. And so you'll get the replay emailed to you. And again, just reach out if you have any other questions. Thank you, Carissa.
Thank you. I'll get that PowerPoint over to you, Lotta, too. And I do apologize for that interruption. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you.